Welcome to Soul-Led Creative Women, a podcast for women passionate about personal growth, seeking bold, brave tools to navigate life's ups and downs. So today I have Susan Hensley with me. Susan is a transformational coach, speaker, and author dedicated to helping people navigate life's transitions with joy, creativity, and resilience. Through art journaling, she was able to reconnect with the joy and curiosity that often gets buried beneath adulthood's complexities. Now, Susan shares this transformative journey with others, teaching how art journaling can silence the inner critic and tap into the right brain for problem solving, healing, and self discovery. So, welcome, Susan.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Excellent. So I might have already hinted at it, but today we're going to be talking all about art journaling. I actually want to talk about art journaling as a creative spiritual practice. So first of all, let's just kick off with your journey. Tell us about how you got started with art journaling and why this work is so important to you.
Sure. So I stumbled into art journaling completely accidentally, probably 8 years ago now. As what his background is, I've had a pretty strong meditation practice for a number of years and a journaling practice. So I've tried to always connect to my inner wisdom and spirit, right? It's something I've been aware of. And yet, I was working a really high pressure corporate job. I'd been there, 20 plus years, really thought I would stay another, 5, 6 years for all the reasons we get targets in our mind. And I was just getting really burned out. I joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'll be honest, it's an ongoing battle. And uh, I went to just an art workshop given by a friend, a colleague, on the weekend, right? I think I was needing a different outlet. And it was very casual. It was like a rainy Saturday. There were just a few of us there. And while she was explaining the color wheel to some of the other people, I was sort of in the corner and there were some paints. And I just started playing. I'm just making a mess. And it's like no plan, no purpose, just color. And it sort of set that 5-year-old artist free. I filled instantly with joy. I mean, really, even all these years later, I think about that experience and how like visceral it was. It's something I felt throughout my body. And in my coaching practice, I was doing a lot of coaching for career coaching and executive coaching. Always share to people when something lights you up, right? Look for those glimmers, look for those sparks. I mean, really pay attention. I believe those are the signals we're getting from the universe, from our soul to not what it didn't signal to me was like become an artist. It's this is an
Mm.
outlet you need. And so I just began playing with art. It was a mess. I'll preface it by saying that nothing in my book, in my training, in my workshops is about creating a piece of art, right? Something you hang in the wall. It's all about the act of creating, of play, of expression in order to tap into, your soul, your spirit, your authentic self. So that day in a flash, I was hooked on how good it felt. And so I just kept playing with it at home, and it ended up being a really nice release. And over time, the pandemic came and everything went crazier. And I really doubled down on the art journaling and I started to see the messages that were emerging, right? It went from being a place of play and just pure stress release to really talking back to me, encouraging me to take risks, helping me process really difficult emotions. There was a period where journal entry after journal entry, I'm drawing little screaming faces. I use a lot of crayons, right? It's all about the stuff you used as a kid and really process what felt to me like layers and layers of anger and get at what was underneath that. And eventually, the art journaling left me to leaving that job several years before I had thought I would, sort of taking this leap. Eventually, I wrote a book about it. And it it has been, like I said, as a lifelong seeker and practitioner and believer in signs, it has by far been the most whole body, surprising, sort of
Hmm.
joyful tool. I guess
Hmm.
that's the avenue. And that's what compels me to talk about it. Because, like any tool, it works better
Hmm.
for some people than others. But it's so low barrier. Like any
Hmm.
listener can do it today with what they have at home, quite
Hmm.
honestly.
Yeah, yeah. So there's so much we can talk about here, but first of all, I want to start with the concept that sort of underpinning, your experiences with the art journaling and now, your work sharing that with others is really the concept that creativity is a powerful tool for self-connection and healing. So tell us a bit about that specifically and your thoughts around why creativity is so powerful for self-connection and healing.
Until I experienced it, I would not have thought it. So I will share that it for me
Yeah.
was something that I experienced. And what I have found, and then what I've seen in others, is when you are in that creative space, when, as the brain research shows, you've moved into that right brain, that holistic, connected, right? It's really what
Mhm.
connects to, your listeners hopefully appreciate like that, the universe and others. It so silences the inner critic. It kicks in a flow that I find it opens up possibility that when I'm in that state, I am so much more open. I have
Mhm.
found it's helped with my meditation practice, my
Mhm.
journaling practice is it's really helped me in a very different way, quiet in a very settled manner, the inner
Mhm.
critic or that judge. Because as you are doing something creative, like I said, I use art and paint and collage and crayons. It honestly, it could be playing with clay. It could be
Mhm.
building something with sticks, singing, taking photos. It doesn't have to be with that. But when you are in that space, there's the somatic components of it that I think are really important. Your body is engaging in it, your eyes, your senses that I think opens us up faster. I also
Mhm.
think the other bit of help is play. We can be
Mhm.
very, very serious in speaking. Looking for enlightenment. I lived in Hong Kong for several years and I would go to different meditation retreats. And those can be serious, right? You're looking for enlightenment. There's a
Mhm.
lot of discipline and
Mhm.
posture. And it's great because I think some discipline's really important, but it all of a sudden becomes for me with a personality type like I have, another to do. There's a
Yeah,
clenching.
like hard work,
And
right?
yes. And I have found for people who are sort of wired in what I call the Western world's drive and go,
Mhm.
play is very, very
Mhm.
freeing.
Yeah.
I joke all the time, and in any workshop, I have people just start with crayons. Is as adults, I have yet to meet an adult who can take themselves seriously holding a crayon. Right? We
Yeah.
just don't have an expectation
Mm.
of ourselves being masters when you're holding, a pink crayon or a yellow crayon.
Mm.
And I've just found that lighter aspect to really, and so it's the lightness, the play, the creativity to open me up to signs from the universe and that connection in a very different
Mm.
way
Mm.
than when I would be more trying to quiet my mind and connect
Yeah.
sort of through stillness.
Yeah, it takes some of the effort out of it because it's quite distracting for that busy part of your brain, right? When you're immersed in this playful, expressive, just for the sake of it activity, then,
Yeah.
you're distracting that busy, focused, hardworking part of your brain. So, yeah, and I would say, I hope you agree, that it can become like a bit of a meditation in action, the act of creating. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting on mornings where I have the time, I'll sort of try and follow 3 steps. I sort of journal to get any dreams out of my head for a few minutes, just try and push
Mhm.
that, meditate, and then I will art journal. And I find myself falling into a deeper state of flow, art journaling than the other 2. Now, rather, it's a 3-step build on the ideal morning where I have it,
Yeah.
or
Hmm.
I've also found it will help me reach a state of calm. It will help me emotionally regulate
Yeah.
very, very quickly, that being able to scribble, to draw a little screaming face,
Yeah.
to draw lightning bolts in a high moment of emotion, it helps me to regulate and create the
Mm.
distance, because all of a sudden the emotion's been captured safely on the page and
Yeah.
allows you to be moved into that observer role. And I
Yeah.
really like, once again, the somatics of it. You've got your page, which is your safe container, and it's holding that
Yeah.
emotion that you just expressed, and then you're able to take that step back.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. Love that. So, why art journaling then? Out of all the creative outlets that you could have come across, why do you think art journaling has been so powerful for you?
Once again, it was probably the timing. It's where I hit that spark of joy. I also, as I think back to what I call my inner child artist, between the ages of 5 and 8, a lot of research shows that by about age 8 or 9, a lot of children are starting to get messages, unless they're going down like a creative path that, you know,
Yeah.
maybe you're not. There's a lot of that comparison kicks in. What I have found with crayons, with watercolor, with glue sticks and paste is that's what I used a lot as a kid. Although I had some Play-Doh and stretchy things, and if you give me a can of that, I'll still play with that all day and make little coil bowls. It's what I was most familiar with as a kid. I think there's a real hook in there. As I've worked with clients and done workshops, different people loved different things as a kid.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
finding what your creative outlet was as a child
Mhm.
is sort of the key. For me, it happened to be in my sort of preschools and early years. We just had a lot of crayons and collaging stuff. So it
Mhm.
feels like a comfortable place to play. I've met people who had modeling clay who were really into to models, and they would not build the model, they would take other things, you know. So I think it depends. Other people spend a lot of time outside. They would do things with sticks, or they would, glue sticks together. So the
Mhm.
advice I give to a listener is art journaling worked for me. It's easy to keep in a purse or a
Mhm.
bag. It's a few
Mhm.
pens. You can do it anywhere. And that's why I like it. It's low barrier. But if you have something else that's really resonating,
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, do that. I don't think there's specific magic in the art journal. I think that the magic is in creating and play without expectation. It's all
Yeah.
about the creation and the play and the release of the end product. That's where you get the flow, the meditative state, where you get
Mhm.
much more in touch with your authentic self.
Mm. Interesting. And how do you think that risk plays into this? Because I've got this kind of idea that there are different levels of risk taking when it comes to creativity. So you've got high risk creative activities and low risk creative activities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what I love about art journaling,
Hmm.
it's completely low risk. It is
Yeah.
like your
Yeah.
personal journal. I've been a lifelong journaler. I can't even read my own handwriting, to be perfectly honest, but no one's ever looked at my journal. I've never
Hmm.
thought, I'm publishing this,
Hmm.
right? I view my art journal exactly the same. So, what I love about it is it's low risk. It's within your comfort zone to build trust. The funniest thing I did, and it took me a little bit, is when I decided to write a book, because it was nowhere on the horizon. I just started to talk about the power of art journaling in my other transition coaching practice, right? I'm certified in life transitions, and there's all these aspects. And it's like,
Okay.
gosh, art journaling's so helpful. So I'm
Mhm.
talking about it. And finally you realize I should write a book. Well, in the book, I ended up publishing a number of my art journal entries, which is something I absolutely never thought I would do, only to show that it's not about making art, how
Yeah.
childish they are, that there's pages of hearts. There's literally a screaming face with the word shame and rage. And, I chose, once I drew like a boogeyman, another like a screaming wild thing. I published them because anyone looking at them, I've gotten this feedback from readers, no one thinks about what I created. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, this isn't a risky thing, right? This
Yeah,
is
sure.
just expression. And the other thing I noticed, because I kept thinking, oh, people are going to wonder what happened. This, you tell yourself all these stories right before you
Mhm.
publish a book. It kicks up that that perfectionist. It felt like a
Yeah.
very risky thing at the time. I had some really good friends look at it and I said, what did you think when you saw this post that was all about rage and shame and, you know, and it was interesting. I remember the emotion. I felt the emotion. Someone else just looks at it. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting that we think they're going to be there feeling it and judging it when instead it's just something on a page. So even for a person who published her own images as an illustration,
Mhm.
the safety in that, it, like I said, I will say it felt scary. It's not designed for that. I
Yeah.
still art journal all the
Yeah.
time and have no intention of publishing it, but it's so low risk that it really doesn't kick off anxiety. And I wrote a whole chapter about it being a safe container. And it's
Sure.
very similar to when it's almost safer than a written diary because someone
Mhm.
may be able to understand these are your symbols, these are your colors, these are
Mhm.
your images, right? Which
Sure.
I found only you really know how you use. I would like to
Yeah.
think people would understand a
Or what
screaming
they
face,
mean.
but
Yeah.
yes, but why I was the screaming face, right?
Mm.
That ended up staying private.
Well, yeah, you get to create your own meaning anyway, right?
Yeah,
So it's all
exactly.
down to interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, on the risk thing, I guess I feel like I've got this question later on for you, but I'm going to ask it now because I find it really interesting. I think that the more you give yourself permission to be creative and to access this creative energy that really is kind of a life force and a spiritual connection, as you mentioned before, I think that you want to take higher and higher risks as you go along that path because basically I think what I believe is that, the spiritual part of it becomes deeper and more meaningful and more connected the higher the risks that you take. So I appreciate that starting with something like art journaling, which feels low risk, is a great way to give yourself that permission, but I think then there's a natural desire to start taking higher risks. Would you agree with that? What's your own journey been like as you've kind of moved through this art journaling and creative journey?
So it's a fantastic question. I love the way you phrased it. Thank you. I had not thought of it like that, but
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. Right. So if you think of sort of my journey, it starts off as just something I'm doing. And through what's happening in my art journal, I go and quit a huge lucrative job that I had
Yeah.
loved well before I thought I was going to, with no plan. And I had all these images of jumping off cliffs, and I had people asking, what are you going to do? And so it got me to take a huge risk into creating a new
Mhm.
life without a vision. So also when I did that, I never thought I would write a book about art journaling. I had a first career as a journalist. I always joked I would never write a book, period. And
Mhm.
certainly couldn't ever envision writing a book that's both a personal journey, a how to and brain science, but it's the personal journey. And all of a sudden I realized, well, no, I'm compelled to. Then I'm sharing the images. Then I'm doing
Yeah.
podcasts, work. And at each stage, what I loved about the way you asked the question is you start where you're comfortable and you start to share and your risk tolerance
Yeah.
just grows and grows. So I would say with each circle, each move out, it will
Mhm.
feel at the beginning sort of daunting, just like going to an art class and
Mhm.
putting any paper on the page. That felt like a little bit of a stretch for me,
Yeah.
quite honestly.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, so you become more and more comfortable. And I find it grows. And this, I think, was embedded in your question. The circles get bigger and bigger and bigger faster, right? Because you realize, I'll use this, I feel this phrase a lot. I'm safe in the universe.
Mhm.
And as you are starting to express yourself creatively, you understand deep within your soul. That is what you are to do, that we are,
Yeah.
creative beings who are being called to fully express ourselves. And it's not frightening. It sounds frightening, but as you move out each circle, and quite honestly, you know, nothing bad happens, right?
Yeah.
You get braver and braver and braver.
Yeah, because it's deepening that spiritual connection. And I believe it's about tapping into your personal truth and connecting with that in really deeply profound ways, and then finding safe ways for you at this moment to express that in all areas of your life, right? Whether, and the creative part of it, the art journaling in your case, it just teaches you how, the possibility of it. It doesn't, and then it ripples out into other areas where you're taking, similar kind of positions of expression, using, your authentic truth kind of as the platform for that. So, I mean, that's how I interpret it all anyway. So, I
Oh,
feel like we're on the
no.
same page.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I really appreciate the way you express that. But no, that's a beautiful way to share how that happens and the ripple effect.
Mm. So do you believe then that embracing creativity is the key to unlocking more of what we want in life? More
Oh,
fulfillment, more connection, more joy? What are your thoughts around that?
uh, 100%. Right.
Mhm,
Until I really started to embrace creativity, I would take risks, but I was very much following a certain success script, right? What
mhm,
I'd seen parents do, what you see people of your age and culture
mhm.
sort of doing. You can get this to do. And
External validation, I'm
it
assuming as
is.
well.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a fundamental human drive. And I had a lot of that. And moving into the creative space, because I get so much now intrinsic,
Yeah.
internal validation, and the things that come back to me off the page, even if it's, and once again, it's the symbols become deeply personal and you're not even consciously giving the meaning, but it's like the support. It's really interesting. If I have found the art journal and how it speaks back to me, the support it gives me, the
Mhm,
encouragement,
mhm,
the way you see the resilience that comes back is deeper and more meaningful, as all
mhm.
intrinsic goals and things
Yep.
are, than any external validation. And it really helps in society and with what I've been working with in my own life. Like I joke about being a recovering perfectionist, to challenge that, to
Yeah.
shake it. It's like, why am I considering this or doing this? And it's like, well, because I've seen others do this. But is this true to me? No.
Mm,
And then it
mm,
helps you make, and it so the question becomes easier. The
mhm.
the binding rod or whatever sort of metaphor becomes better tuned. You're tapping into, yeah, your inner knowing. It becomes so much sharper and clearer when you're
Yeah.
using creativity.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it teaches us that we already have everything we need within ourselves to thrive in life, right? Whereas,
Mm,
the old version of me certainly was relying on this external validation and these milestones and these goals and successes that the world had taught me that I needed to, be striving for.
yeah.
So what do you believe then, is the thing that really stops people from going on this creative journey and embracing, creativity, even though we know it's so magical? What do you believe, stops people from going there?
Yeah. What initially stops people is it's can be like a knee-jerk reaction is, I'm not creative. I'm a terrible artist. They will repeat wherever they got that. No matter how many times I have said before, well, let's be clear. This is not about
Yeah.
being an artist. This is not about creating an end product. It is all about inter, and it'll be really interesting. I will have said that repeatedly. And there's that moment of of panic, of what I call stutter. So I've designed, I'll share it with you and your listeners
Mhm.
because, on my website there's a free downloadable PDF on how to get started. But I love this particular exercise because it gets people to give it a try, because once again, it's a low risk, low barrier exercise. When I've done it with groups, I have people spread out. If you're alone, you do it at home. You find a song you love on your phone. Most songs are about 3 minutes, I'll tell you. Like, don't choose some really long one. Find one that's 3, 4 minutes. Take a piece of paper, two colors. If all you have is pens at home, a blue and black one or pencil, if you have any sort of ability to have colored pens or crayons, and the request is for 3 minutes, the length of the song, so you don't have to be real prescriptive. Just fill the piece of paper. I don't care how. Right. This is in the workshop. I give everyone two crayons in the workshop and they get 1 3-minute song. They're all spread out. I explain no one is going to look at this. You can throw it away. There's a trash can. You can keep it, but you're not going to show it to me. You're not going to show it to anyone else. No one's seen you. You have 3 minutes and all you need to do with these two crayons I've given you is fill this page. Don't care how. So put on song, usually upbeat. They do it. I have them take a few deep breaths at the beginning and then we debrief it. I say to anyone who wants to get up, throw it away, feel free. No one throws it away. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, okay, admire it. Like, let's be our own proud parent. Because that's the other thing I really try and teach is self-compassion and self-appreciation for the
Mhm.
act of creation, right?
Mhm.
In the trainings and on my online course, it's really play, curiosity, and then
Mhm.
being your own proud parent. That compassion and reinforcement for what you
Mhm.
did really helps fuel it. But then when we do the debrief in the groups, like, how'd you feel? Playful, silly, free. I love not having rules. I mean, people will say, I've never done anything as an adult that I didn't have a rule.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's so interesting because I actually gave them a bunch of constraints. They only had two crayons, one size piece of paper is only a 5 by 7 and only 3 minutes. So there were three constraints, which is where you get so much creativity, right? I mean, that's one of the things when you study innovation or creativity is constraints really help to spur us. And it's so interesting because of the number of people I've done it with. I've only had one or two people say that they couldn't get rid of the inner critic, that they felt just silly and judged.
Yeah.
Well, most people, though, feel very, very free. They get that like dopamine hit that I clearly
Mhm.
got, where all of a sudden you're like, whoa, it's like that inner 5-year-old artist just got set free and
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
moves them back to that experience. So anyone listening, I share that pretty routinely because I do think that trying it helps you understand if it sparks joy. Then if it does, what happens is just the taking the time and building a habit, right? And that is what we know can always be tricky. And that's where I put a lot of recommendations around. We have dead time. If you cook a lot and you wait for water to boil, keep a pad and notepad in the kitchen. Keep it if you wait a lot of time in lines and cars, right? And pick, who knows what we all have certain downtime during the
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
And instead of what most people do these days with the downtime is they grab their phone
Yeah.
and scroll. Right. So I sort of try and get a replacement if you don't
Mhm.
have the 10 minutes
Mhm.
in the morning for like replace one of those times that you might grab the phone and just doodle, right? For a few minutes and start comparing how you feel, like
Mhm.
how you feel after you've scrolled versus how you feel after you've scribbled.
Yeah. And, I think people learn to value and prioritize it more as they go along that journey. The more that you do those small things, right? And the more that you give yourself permission to get stuck into it, then the more you learn to value and prioritize it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's self-fulfilling. And it's also why I really encourage people to praise themselves, right? Because we're tapping into play and what I call the inner child artist, that reinforcing self. And what you're reinforcing is that you took a few minutes to play. You're not, once
Mhm.
again, reinforcing you made a beautiful thing. You can admire it. It's like, because it was fun. You've created it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just fun to see what we create. But I try and really build that in because once again, that helps to reinforce the habit, right? You're just trying to build a habit if, your listeners or people are finding it speaks to them.
Yeah. I mean, one of my angles is really that when we understand that the creative journey and that permission to be creative and to, value and prioritize our creative selves, when we understand that that kind of operates in duality with our spiritual, selves as well, and that the two things actually mirror each other and feed each other. When we understand that, it's much easier to lean into it and to say, right, well, this is important for me because there's a bigger picture here, and there's kind of my own personal growth and my own spiritual expansion to feed and support as I enter that creative space. What are your thoughts around that concept?
Uh, Once again, I love the way you've expressed it and how you've expressed the duality there, because different things drive people to repeat a habit. And I do think for spiritual seekers, and it's what I found, it's how I've sort of built art journaling in general into
Mhm,
my practice. It is that reinforcing concept
mhm.
that it is a spiritual connection. And like I said, life force wanting to create and wanting to come through me and
Yeah,
me to connect with it is what it feels like. So it feels sacred, feels
yeah.
holy. And that's where I think as a tool, if you will, as a modality, it can meet people where they are, right? It can, at its, and it won't say lowest, at its entry point, it's a great
Mhm.
stress reducer,
Yeah.
right? At its, what I find most sacred point, you're
Mhm.
talking and co-creating with the divine,
Yeah.
you're in touch, and I feel like I'm getting
Mhm.
guidance
Mhm.
and I'm manifesting, right? It's this interesting two-way street. Nothing specific when I say I'm also manifesting because I'm feeling
Yeah.
connection. I'm giving back. I've had a lot of people ask me, this is interesting aside, is it a vision board or is it a scrapbook? And the way I'm using it, it's neither. But what I what
It
I
could be.
recognize is, in terms of, are there days that I'm creating that I'm working through something or I'm inadvertently dreaming? And I'll go back to, there was this period where I had all these people on cliffs. I was doing a lot of collaging, and who
Mhm.
knew there were so many pictures of people standing on cliffs, but I found every single one of them. And it was it wasn't me saying, "I want to take a leap. I want to quit my job. I want to feel like I'm jumping off into the unknown." There was not that conscious thought. I was drawn to those pictures over and over again, and the words
Mhm.
were coming. So, it was a subconscious, it was a spiritual, uh, vision or manifestation coming to me more than me saying the other. Now, is it
Directing it.
entirely possible when I collage, I see a beautiful sunrise or a hill, or I'm drawing a hill and I draw a person on top of it that I'm wanting to feel, right? So I think there's this, I use the phrase co-creation quite a bit, but it's not, when I look at the vision boarding exercises, it's sort of like once a year or once every 6 months. And it's very much, this is what I want to achieve or bring to my life, right? There's a
Mhm.
component, and you could certainly use it like that. You could use it to reflect. I sort of use it more in the real time.
Mhm. Mhm. So then specifically, in terms of using art journaling, to unlock that spiritual side of us and that spiritual practice, how do we do that?
So I think I've found with so much spiritual practice, the intention setting is really
Yeah.
helpful. And lots of times I will, and different things speak to different, but like, for highest good, for all available, what are the message, right? So I will have, and lots of times I've come out of meditation, and an intention to be open,
Mhm.
to be present, to see,
Mhm.
but also the intention of, and lots of times I may have meditated on peace. I may have done sort of a meta loving compassion meditation. Those are where I like to spend time. So I will have many times an intention, if that's how I'm coming to it, just to
Mhm.
see what emerges.
Sure.
So I will set some attention and see what emerges. I've also found so many times, and this is powerful, and it's the reverse. When there's fear that keeps coming up versus pushing it down,
Mhm.
how quickly when we're working with fear, with colors and symbols, love comes underneath it.
Hmm.
And it's like, I view it as that spiritual reassurance of connection and presence. And it's very supportive process that you're working through something. There's, like I said, in many cases, a lot of fear or anger. There's a lot. And then under it, all of a sudden, I'll start to choose colors that to me are love, universality, connection. And it merges in that sense. And I honestly, I'm quite awestruck, and I've been at this for years, that it never ceases to make me feel grateful and
Hmm.
like I'm in the presence of, a miracle or something that's
Mm.
awe worthy and worthy of gratitude and connection.
Mm. So, do most of the people that you work with, do they identify as creative, or are they kind of
No.
discovering being creative?
Yeah, I would say I've yet to, well, a couple people have identified as creative, and that's got its can have its own set of barriers.
Yeah,
The vast majority of people do not
yeah,
identify as creative. In workshops, I've had a few people who've had, it's really interesting, they've had formal training in a creative endeavor. And we
right.
actually have to talk a lot about what play looks like for them and what
Yeah,
tapping. They have a lot of rules. I mean, it's interesting when anything's a little
mm,
blanket statement, but for most of the, air quote creatives who've had formal
yeah,
training, who've made a living, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of baggage and armor
yeah.
that starts to build up.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it's very real. And many times, if it's a workshop, I'll work with them separately. We'll say, okay, if it's not this, what does
Okay.
X look like? Where is that place of play and freedom going to reside if you
Mm,
happen to have gone to an art institute, right?
mm,
Because it really won't be. Or they will say, it's in this medium. It's in
yeah,
picking up the drums again. It's in, and so I have actually found, like, smaller subset that you would say are creatives, but uh, it really, in working with them one on one, I try and find something that gets at the same connection
yeah.
and sense of play without all the expectations and learnings that has gone on in their professional pursuit of their talent.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, for me personally, I feel like I'm actually shifting into working more with creative people, and understanding that that's who I attract, not necessarily people that are discovering creativity for the first time,
Interesting.
which is an interesting thing because I think, like you said, they do come with a different set of, frustrations, blocks, barriers, what have
Yeah.
you, problems. And part of that is, the customization and the personalization around it, right? Because
Yeah.
we're all on our own we're all on our own journey with it. And a lot of the time, I think that it's actually about this connection to the spiritual side and understanding the power of using your creative practice to tap into that. But also, just generally, in terms of finding a new way of looking at your creative practice in terms of meaning and insight and like the personal attachment to it, rather than it just being for the sake of it. I think we move past that, even though the main reason I create myself today is because of the process, like you've described.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about the artwork necessarily. I mean, I do have attachment to the way things look, but at the same time, I mainly show up just for the process because it's so powerful as a connector to that spiritual side of ourselves. So I think that's really interesting, in terms of where people start on that creative journey. I think that really is really fascinating. So, if people do want to start an art journaling practice and they, they need to overcome a few things, I'm assuming, in terms of, not being good enough to start, not being creative, knowing where to start, how do they get started? What's the simplest way to get started?
The very simplest way and is what I described earlier. I would go out if you don't have it and I'd buy a very small pack of crayons,
Hmm.
inexpensive. And so there's a real key for people who are coming at this in the way I've described, where you're staying in process, not in output. And I think there may be a point where people do move to output, but
Yep.
as we've talked about it today, it's all about discovery. So if you don't have any of that at home, you don't have kids, get yourself, an 8 or 12 pack. I'm not talking about 64 crayons here. Small, I mean, really small, small pack or whatever you loved as a kid. If you love the
Mm.
pasty glue, do that and find a few, junk
Mhm.
mail catalogs, or if there's a magazine laying around, or old greeting cards, something you can collage with. Just take a notebook, or it can be a blank page of paper. I use a blank notebook, just like a written journal. My written journal has
Yeah.
lines in it. Use the same
Yep.
size, 5 by 7. It's blank. I like the inexpensive watercolors because they're messy. They dry differently. You're always sort of
Mm.
surprised how they dry. But find what you love. Do not spend any real money, and just start with the plain. Like I said, give it 3 minutes in a song. Like I said, if you're stuck, there's a free PDF on the website you can do. I also have a video with 4 exercises, but try the exercise I described. You just fill a sheet of paper, but then start to pay attention to how you feel.
Mhm.
How do I feel before? How do I feel after? What does it feel like if I doodle what I love to draw as a kid? It's interesting. If you say to someone, what was your go-to drawing when you were a little kid? Almost everyone, once again, I haven't met someone that doesn't have something. Now, some people it's shapes, some people it's cars, trees, mountains, suns, hearts, bunnies, cats. I mean, it's really interesting when you ask people, like, was there a shape or symbol you drew over and over again, like on
Mm.
books or binders? And most people have one, you
Yeah.
know, and, there's an exercise of draw that for 4 minutes.
Mhm.
Once again, fill a page. So it's just getting them used to the feeling of creating, playing with color, and then seeing where it goes. So I
Mm.
try and once again make it as low barrier, low risk, all about fun, and then paying attention to how they felt during it and
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, so important. That reflection piece is really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, the,
I
the
think sometimes,
reflection piece is key to getting it
yeah,
started.
and even just sort of staring at it, getting a cup of your favorite drink and just sitting there and looking at it, because it will kind of give
Yeah,
you, over time, it gives you more and more, I think, when you look at something that you've created. Do you agree with that?
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so interesting to flip back through the
Mm.
journal pages. And once again, that's where I find so much of the insights and wisdom about how resilient we are, how far we've come, how we're encouraging ourselves, right?
Mm.
Our spirit is encouraging us. And that's why it's nice to build a habit so that you do start to have pages where eventually those ideas are flowing and you're really tapping into that aspect of yourself.
So tell us a bit about your art journaling practice and how it's changed over time. What did it look like at the very beginning versus what it looks like now?
Interesting. It resembles what I did at the beginning, but
Mhm.
the big change, which is so interesting, is my faith in it. How quickly I feel like I get messages, how quickly I see patterns, how I go to it with
Okay.
such confidence. So I'm what
Mhm.
changed. Sometimes I'll change up mediums. I have very intentionally kept with very inexpensive materials. Dear friend of mine, gosh, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, gave me some beautiful, she knew what I was doing, bought me beautiful paints, but very
Mhm.
pigmented, and a gorgeous journal with a leather cover and blah, blah. And it brought out that critic in me. It made
Yeah.
me feel wasteful. It made me, I immediately, like, I don't have the talent to do this. I was trying
Mm.
to draw a heart with this beautifully pigmented thing. And it's like, why would I? So I've made some decisions along the way
Okay.
for me,
Yeah.
and they're personal. And I tell people, you are going to be your own guide, right? I'm creating a structure for you. I'm explaining sort of the why and how, that if you want to go to other materials
Yeah.
and build skills. I have found, as for me in my journey, I've stayed in the children's department, very, very inexpensive
Mhm.
materials. I'll go to sometimes thicker paints,
Mhm.
different kind of glues. Sometimes I'm more drawn to certain things. But the big change over the 8, 9 years is really internal. I go
Yeah.
to it now with a sense of confidence with communion.
Mm.
Almost, we've talked about the spiritualities. I know this isn't something I'm doing to a page. It's something that's coming and greeting,
Yeah.
greeting me and embracing me. So
There's a
the
trust there. I'm assuming a
yeah,
trust.
the,
Yeah.
the
No
real
matter what happens, it's going to be okay. Yeah.
yeah. So that's how I've really come to it. That I
Mm.
am different.
Yeah. That's so powerful. So, for all the women out there then who are curious about starting an art journaling practice, to support their spiritual journey, what powerful message would you like to leave them with today?
Yeah, I truly believe play and color connects us to soul.
Yeah.
Period. I did not understand that being a lifelong seeker until
Mm.
I started using play and color, and I found the connection to soul and to spirit
Mhm.
almost instantaneous. So, yeah, that's
So
why I want
powerful.
people
Love
to
that,
try it.
Susan. So
Yeah.
good. So, how can people get to know you better, Susan, and get a real feel for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, easiest way is really my website. Like it's just Susan-Hensley.com. And like I said, there's free PDF, there's online training, there's book, there's, uh, just resources. I answer any messages if you do contact me. So very open to discuss this. It feels like something that can really help people. And so I
Yeah.
try and share it with the same open spirit that I feel when I art journal.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today. I loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, me too. It was terrific. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Sam here. Thanks so much for listening to the end. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Join my free soul-led creative community and gain access to free guides and resources, plus exclusive events and workshops, all from within the members area. This is your chance to connect with me and other like-minded souls. Please head to samhorton.co/community. Take care.